Shall we? All righty. I'm going to invite the chime to sing. And that is this wonderful invitation to arrive fully to this practice. And I'd like to invite a spirit of joy to resound with this chime. Welcome, everyone. This is SatiSeva, and my name is Julia. I am the facilitator of this practice. I am its creator, and I'm so happy to be here sharing the 16 mindfulness practices with you. I began to create the workings of SatiSeva back in 2020 because there was a real longing for Buddhist-inspired mindfulness practices that included family members, friends, allies, and professionals. And so people were wanting to seek sort of a Buddhist-inspired Al-Anon, if you will. And so that was how we first started. But quickly, I began to realize that the sort of segregated nature of the traditional idea of recovery, people with substance use disorder in one camp, those supporting them in another camp, was one way to have these very difficult conversations and explorations. I wanted to create an environment where we could all come together because habit energy or addiction is universal. It is an expression of being human, and it comes in many, many forms, not only the use and misuse of substances. So I wanted to get us all together practicing mindfulness so we can look at our habit energies together and find ways to soften and open the heart as we explore. I wrote a book about it, which just came out. Many of you have this book, and I want to thank you for your purchase and your support. It supports our mission here at Soul Center to bring wellness to all people. Today, we are going to explore the 15th chapter, the 15th mindfulness practice. And this is called the mindfulness practice of reducing violence. And today, I want to share with you a couple of things that we're going to be up to. We're going to be practicing two instruments of peace. These are the tools of the SatiSeva practice. On Wednesday this month, we practiced patience. I brought forward the little section on patience. And so today's practice is going to be an invitation for you to draw from your own patience so you can really engage with this practice. The first instrument of peace that we're going to be exploring is called Get a Thesaurus. Words matter. And I love this practice. I really, really do. So I want to show you my thesauruses. This is one from when I was in high school, and it is so well worn. It's taped and it's chewed, and I love this thing. But I was gifted one that just blows my mind, and I want you to see it because this one lives by my writing table. Are you ready? Look at the size of this monster. Look at it. Look at all the little tabs in it. Oh my gosh. So many freaking words, people. All righty. This was gifted to me by Lo. And we've had so much fun playing with this thesaurus. Now, I want to give you, and I want to invite you into part of the marriage of patience with this instrument of peace to get a thesaurus. I have gone on the computer and just what's a synonym for and get a thesaurus that way. And it's fine. It's quick and it's easy. And it doesn't help create the conditions for patience because it's quick and easy. So when you go to a hard copy, a thesaurus, when you go to it on your bookcase or on your desk or your coffee table, you're actually enacting in the body and in the mind a pause, a slowing down. There's reverence to it. You hold it in your hands. You bring to life your intention. It's not just about looking up a synonym for a word. It's something so much more than that. It's about broadening the mind. It's about opening the mind. And so to have a hard copy is such an extraordinary way to cultivate patience. I don't want to suggest that you can never use the computer. Remember, we're not talking about dualism. Books good, computer bad. That's the dualistic mind. I just want you to be aware that this option is really powerful. So take your time when you're looking up words. All righty? The second instrument of peace that we're going to engage today is something called, and I would encourage you to write this down, um, or just really we'll be practicing it. You probably won't have to, but it is called I have the capacity to dot dot dot. I have the capacity to dot dot dot. In our practice today, friends, we're going to be doing this combination where I'm going to share with you the synonyms that I have discovered for the word violence. And I'm going to preface sharing with you those synonyms with the phrase, with the instrument of peace, I have the capacity to. So that's going to be our meditation today, to just allow some space for your mind, your heart to receive these capacities and to take notice. When you hear a synonym and it clangs like a gong, you feel a little aversion, take note of it. It might be a teacher in disguise. Anytime you feel that like resistance, it's okay. Be very gentle with yourself and just notice, oh, yeah, I've got some aversion to the word, to that word. Huh, would you look at that? I wonder what that's all about. Okay, just that's the openness to it. We don't have to make any judgments. We don't have to play with any story. Just notice. You'll also notice that you'll hear some synonyms that may stir up feelings like, well, I've done that. That's not, why is that violent? That's not so bad. Which then begs the question, is all violence bad? Is some violence good? Could be true and not the whole truth. That again is encouraging us to soften the mind away from its dualistic mindset, good or bad, and open up to something both and. And friends, again and again and again, this is a practice. Together, let's prepare the body to receive this wisdom. And this wisdom is not even sourced with me, friends. This wisdom is coming through me, and it is breathing life in you, inviting your own wisdom to sing your own spirit And so, to allow for this ease, we have to prepare the body. And to do that, I would encourage you to find a position in the body that feels a little bit alert. I often like to engage in meditation in a position of relaxation, but for today's practice, I'd like to encourage some wakefulness, some alertness. So if you can, find a place where you can sit or be with a certain degree of focus. If you're moving, obviously you can't engage stillness. So instead, try to move with purpose and focus so you can at least hear the sentiments in this practice. If stillness is available to you, be still. Even if you're writing and taking notes, notice certain parts of your body that aren't moving and give yourself a moments of pause to allow the wisdom to settle in like sand, finding its connection to the earth. Together as a community, let's breathe in. Let's breathe out. We are gathered here today to explore violence with a commitment to reduce it in our own lives, with a commitment to understand violence and its many faces and manifestations. We are using the power of synonym to guide our awareness. And we are also using the instrument of peace, I have the capacity to, as a way of practicing equanimity and accountability to recognize because I have this capacity, I want to be fearless in recognizing it. I want to understand the conditions that create its arising, and I want to learn from it enough so that I can shift it and bring peace instead of the habits of violence that can often go under my own radar. Here are some synonyms for the word violence. And here's the practice of I have the capacity to, or for. I have the capacity to feel vehemence. I have the capacity for intensity. I have the capacity to create turbulence. I have the capacity to bluster. I have the capacity to feel in an uproar. I have the capacity to storm, rage, and fury. I have the capacity to feel frenzied and forced. I have the capacity for hysterics, eruptions, outrage, shock. I have the capacity to be a fiend, to be a hellion, to be a thug, to be tough. I have the capacity to lash out, to seethe, to explode, implode. I have the capacity to incite. I have the capacity to lash, irritate, inflame. I have the capacity to aggravate and kindle. Given the right conditions, I have the capacity to be savage, to fan the flames. I have the capacity to come in like a lion. A colloquial statement that I certainly have been conditioned to believe is a good thing. And that might be true and not the whole truth. I have the capacity to fly off the handle. I have the capacity to be uncontrollable and headstrong. This is a sample of synonyms for the word violence. And so you can appreciate, I hope you can appreciate, I want you to appreciate that violence is complex. It is vast. It has many faces. It has many arisings. It has so much capacity to live in me in all kinds of different ways, dependent upon conditions. My violence will not erupt out of nowhere. It's dependent upon conditions. And so, as I'm exploring my capacity, one of the ways that we can work with the judgment of it is to acknowledge I have the capacity to lash out. I do. I can be incredibly unskillful when I'm angry, and I can lash like a cat and take these swipes. Not enough to kill or maim, and many, for a long time, I used to think that's what violence is, brutality and horrific harm. But I've since learned the subtle nature of violence as it lives in me. And so I can swipe and draw spiritual blood and hurt people. It is a violence I regret. It is a violence that I feel humiliated by and ashamed of. And I could create conditions for a really elaborate pity party. You'd all be welcome. I can create the conditions for denial and defensiveness, for which you'll all be pushed away. I can engage all of those unskillful conditions too. I have the capacity for all of that. But I'm trying to do something different. I'm trying to engage the antonym of violence. And there was one word in my little mini Roget's thesaurus, one antonym for violence. I can't wait to share it with you. Well, let's breathe first and just enjoy the delicious suspense and create some joy and some room for this antonym to come in. So let's breathe in. And let's breathe out. The antonym is moderation, the middle way. Isn't that wonderful? So, of course, I had to look up synonyms for moderation, and I'm going to give you three. Gentleness is the first, sobriety is the second, and quiet is the third. And a little word about quiet. Quiet doesn't always mean the absence of sound. Quiet can be simply and profoundly a state of mind. So you could be on a noisy subway, you could be in a field full of crickets and birds and so much sound, so much noise. You could be in the middle of children playing and laughing on a playground. And yet your state of mind and your state of being is quiet. I have the capacity to be gentle. I have the capacity to be sober, free of substances that confuse my mind, free of distorted thinking, free of fixed mind. I have the capacity to be quiet. I have the capacity for moderation. I have the capacity to walk the middle way. By engaging this instrument of peace that says, I have the capacity for lashing out, for example, I do. And it lives with me regularly. Given certain conditions, it still comes up. I do not have it perfected and by that I mean, I do not have it practiced enough that it goes away completely. And I'm not entirely sure that's the point. I think the point is to understand the act of lashing out, understanding how that capacity lives within me well enough that I understand the conditions associated with it, associated with that arising that enable and activate the action of lashing out, enacting this violence. If I understand the arising, even the feeling, the sensation in my body, the mood that comes over me, the thoughts and stories that begin to churn, this is all fuel that begins to activate this unskillful, violent action of lashing out. But if I can understand those conditions ahead of time, the feeling will all be there, the mood will all be there, the thoughts and stories will all be there, the arising will keep happening, but maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to provide myself some moderation and it will affect my restraint. And I can say to the person that I'm about to out to, I need a pause. I'm about to engage unskillfully that will harm you and me. And I'd like to create a boundary of pause so that I don't harm myself or you. And I'm going to take I don't know, 15 minutes to breathe, to be quiet. And I'm going to return myself to a practice that reminds me I have the capacity to be gentle and clear, restrained, peaceful. Wow. Would you look at this? Isn't it amazing how much capacity we have? I'm in awe of us. And so I encourage you to take this practice into your mind and heart and spirit and treat yourself with warm regard, even when you see an arising of a capacity connected to violence that you don't like, that you're ashamed of and you're embarrassed by. That's okay. Invite it to be okay. And acknowledge that with your precious awareness, you have something to learn here. There's a teacher there that is offering you wisdom and mastery over your own unskillfulness. And this, my friends, is healing and transformative. And at the risk of sounding grandiose, it is also transcendent. I'd like us to take some time, maybe 7 minutes or so, 8 minutes. Yeah, let's take 8 minutes. This is a sun pause, which is also an instrument of peace in this book. Let's take 8 minutes to integrate this, to bring this in. And maybe there's a synonym that really stuck on you, like a prickly seed that catches your garment. And let it stick there, let it be there, and see if you can practice with it. See if you can bring some acknowledgement to it, some recognition of your capacity to have this arising. See if you can create a little space to understand the conditions that activate this. And know that your entire practice is steeped in the benevolence of gentleness, moderation, sobriety, and quiet. Enjoy this practice. Friends, one of the gifts of these mindfulness practices is something we're going to be exploring for the month of October in all of our Recovery Dharma offerings, and that is the cultivation of ego integrity. To mature and to cultivate ego integrity is to simply recognize that the state of the immature ego is to exaggerate. It's either in this place of inflation and arrogance and a bloated sense of self. I'm so great. I'm so magnificent. I'm all the things. Or it's in an equally distorted state that says, I'm worthless. I'm no good. I'm of no value. There's no point to my existence, and so on. All of that is a very inflated ego, and it's immature. And so these practices are to mature the ego enough that those extremes cease to exist. And we have this capacity to hold the negative, the positive, the neutral in equal measure. And it's really challenging because we encounter people in the realm of recovery, for example, that are unpracticed and unskillful. So they might come at me, for example, and say things like, Julia, you always get so defensive. You take everything so personally. Totally true. And not the whole truth. So I'm learning to respond to those types of accusations and recognizing you're right. When I feel threatened, I get defensive. And when I'm defensive, I'm unskillful. And in that unskillfulness, I have the capacity to be aggressive, incredulous, negative. And in my practice, I am learning to become more moderate, more gentle, more open, more curious, so that I can become more receptive and less defensive. I don't have to take everything so personally while dismissing that there are some things that are personal. By golly, it is such a practice. And what a privilege to be able to practice in community with such devotion and sacred joy. Thank you, friends. So I'd like to take a few moments and bring us into a little bit of integration based on what we heard today and so forth. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind. And the first thing I want to encourage is the word violence itself, and to recognize that we've all been conditioned to have a pretty narrow definition, mostly to mean something brutal and deeply, deeply harming. But again, when we look closer and when we engage our own capacity for discernment, we can recognize that violence has many, many subtle forms. And if unchecked, they too can cause harm, and in fact do, toward ourselves and others. And so to be mindful about violence is to actually reduce it in its presence in our lives. And what an extraordinary thing to endeavor, I think. So I want to thank everyone for bringing your A game here today. It was really beautiful for me. I feel so privileged to be here. And the other thing I want to recommend I'd like to recommend a book for everybody. And that is, if you don't have the book already, we in the Spokane Sangha spent a couple years studying this book, so you may already have it. But it's a book called Standing at the Edge by Roshi Joan Halifax, who is a Zen master and the abbess of Upaya Institute in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's an outstanding book. And she talks about edge states. And yesterday, I heard this wonderful word by a Christian pastor. He talked about himself as an edge walker. And what this edge represents is this really eternal middle way point that if we go too far over the edge, we engage in some kind of inflative, reactive, negative response. Likewise, if we don't get close enough to the edge, we're also in a distorted state of avoidance and aversion. So, how do we get to that edge? How do we walk that edge without getting too far away and getting too close and falling over? And it's a dance. And I think the reality is there are going to be times where we feel that aversion, we feel that avoidance. And rather than use that as an opportunity to beat ourselves up, like, oh, there I go again, avoiding, is it might actually be your own wisdom trying to get your attention. By the way, those are Lowe's words to me all the time. Because I have treated this manifestation in my life, my ability to avoid, my ability to procrastinate, as some real negative quality in myself. And it can be true. And the truth is, as Lo has helped me recognize, is that there's something about my avoidant activity that might actually be a whispering intuition, a quiet, shy wisdom that's asking me to wait. And so when you find yourself avoiding that edge state, it could be a good thing. It could be a neutral thing. And so that's what we're trying to do, is apply some neutrality to this whole thing so that we don't keep the edge state as something we're afraid of. Likewise, when we go over the edge, it's so easy to guilt trip ourselves, to be ashamed of ourselves. And that actually keeps us married to that inflated ego. That's like, see, I told you you were an asshole. There you go again, right? It's not helpful. Again, could be true and not the whole truth. So in this book, Standing at the Edge, there's an excellent, excellent chapter on moral outrage. And she speaks to and trains a lot of people in healthcare and a lot of social workers. And she's really all about socially engaged Buddhism. And anytime you are socially engaged, anytime you are in a posture of activism, there is the risk of becoming morally outraged. There's nothing wrong with being morally outraged by itself. It's as an edge state. It's what are you doing with that moral outrage? Are you going over the edge and acting in ways that are harmful to others? Or are you staying far away from the edge and feeling bad about yourself or exhausting yourself, compassion fatigue, empathetic distress? Are you denying yourself, ignoring yourself? It's an excellent, excellent read. All right. So before we go into announcements and a dedication today, I'd like to bring us back to the practice. Synonyms, your thesaurus, it really is a wonderful, wonderful tool to help us gain understanding regarding the conditions for our arisings. It's one thing to be upset. It's something else to feel confused or to feel hurt or to feel overwhelmed. I mean, these are all faces of one's upset. And so, if you can model this language, not in an elitist way or a overeducated way, but in a way that inspires people to stand in your presence as someone who is really looking at their own self, their own capacities, the complex, many faceted nature of us. To be in the presence of someone doing that work is so humbling. It's a little daunting, which is why we will always want to bring forward a spirit of fun and play. So let's just breathe that in, friends. And it's such a wonderful irony to know that we can explore the nature of violence and also sister it with the spirit of play and creativity. I love that. And that really is one of the soul threads of the SatiSeva practice. Go ahead and end our practice today with a dedication of merit. In the northern hemisphere of the earth, we are entering a season that is turning away from the light. It is a time of darkness. It is a time of going in. And this is happening on a spiritual level. It is also in the United States happening on a physical level. We are entering a regressed, dark time. And it's scary and sorrowful. This is an important time to plant those seeds. This is also the time where nature is doing just that. If you go to any garden, you'll notice that many of the perennial flowers are bowing to the earth. They know that they are producing seeds and they want to direct their offspring downward toward the earth so that they can be planted, have a darkened time for rest and gestation. And so, for the conditions to create a stillness awaiting the season of spring and renewal. So, for us, we are dedicating this practice as an invitation to plant seeds of awareness in our own consciousness so that as we engage with the violence and aggression and hostility, we can bring forward sometimes the fragile wisdom, a vulnerable wisdom of these ancient practices. But we can't do it if we don't take the time for stillness, for planting our own fears and sorrows, for nurturing the conditions of those seeds to reveal their knowledge, their trust, their ancient presence. Your words matter, friends. Find the good ones, find the useful ones, bring them into the world, and may they be carried by the beauty of your radiance. May this bring peace and healing to these turbulent, stormy times. Thank you, friends. Namaste.